Welcome everybody to the virtual authors group of the Union League Club. And today we have Brad Thor and Jamie Frevaletti joining us. Jamie's going to be doing the interview, and Brad Thor, of course, is our featured author today. We're very happy to have everybody here. Welcome. I wanted to do bio of Jamie so everybody understands what Jamie's background is. And then we'll talk a little bit about Brad, and then the two of them could take it away in a nice conversation about Brad's new book. So Jamie Frevaletti is an international bestseller author of 7 novels. Great job, Jamie. That's a lot of work. 4 short stories, and is published in 4 languages. Her Emma Carledge series won an International Thriller Writers Best First Novel Award, a Barry Award, and was a Vox Media Pick in Germany. In addition to her own novels, she has written The Janus Reprisal and The Geneva Strategy for Robert London's Covert One series, and is a contributor to the nonfiction anthological, I probably screwed up that word, Anatomy of Innocence, Testimonies of the Wrongfully Convicted, and the Sherlock Holmes anthology, I should say. For the Sake of the Game, a former lawyer, she's a good company, and a distance runner and black belt in Aikido, a Japanese martial art, and she lives in Chicago. So welcome, Brad Thor. I love your background, by the way. It looks beautiful.
Yeah,
Brad
all real, all real.
Is it real? It kind of looks like you're
fake.
at a little swanky bar or something like that.
It's like RL downtown on Chicago Avenue.
That's right. It does. It really does. So Brad, thank you for joining us today. And we're really thrilled to have a #1 New York bestseller author. You have 20 thrillers, including the new book, Near Dark, Blacklash, one of Suspense Magazine's best books of the year. Spy Master, declared by the Washington Times as one of the best all-time best thriller novels. The Last Patriot, nominated Best Thriller of the Year by the International Thriller Writers Association. That's big. And Blowback, one of the top 100 killer thrillers of all time by NPR. Wow. Thank you so much for coming. I know that's a mouthful. I'm glad I got it all out here. But Jamie and Brad, thank you very much. And you two, take it away. I figured we'll have a little bit of a conversation, and then we'll invite the rest of our folks to join us in a Q&A.
Okay, sounds good. Brad, thank you for asking me to do this. I'm really excited to interview about this new book and to meet you. We've never met, which is kind of strange.
No, we have the ITW in common, but we haven't met. So this is a pleasure for me too. Thank you.
I think it's important for everyone who's on board here. Not that everyone's from Illinois, but apparently I just learned that Brad grew up in Illinois. So a local author in many ways.
Yeah.
Chicago.
Downtown. I've had many lunches at the Union League Club.
Yeah, so it's great to have you. So congratulations on the 20 books.
Thank you.
Near Dark, I got the book last week from, everyone should know I've read the book from your publicist, David. He was very nice to give it to me. And I was really kind of blown away by this book. So I really want to get into where you went with this, because you've been 20 years now with the Scott Harvath character. Can you kind of, for those who are unfamiliar or haven't read it in a while, can you kind of explain to us how you came up with this very interesting character? Can you give the background? What made you decide to start with him?
Sure. So, Jamie, what I tell people is, so I've written 20 novels overall, 19 that focus predominantly on Harvath as the protagonist. And I did one spin-off where he had a cameo in it called The Athena Project, about an all-female Delta Force team. But like the James Bond movies, it doesn't matter if you've seen any before. You can jump right into the newest one and start right there. So you can start with Near Dark. You don't have to say, I got to go back to the beginning of Thor's books. You don't have to read them in order. They're all written to be standalones. So the Harvath series, I've always joked that, Kathy, you may want to mute, because when we hear your phone, the focus is on you, I think. The camera clicks to you. So when I think of Robert Ludlum, I think that Jason Bourne was probably his alter ego, the same way that Jack Ryan was for Tom Clancy, or that Bond was for Ian Fleming. So to a certain degree, Scott Harvath is a bit my alter ego, and then also kind of a collection of men and women that are involved in the special operations community, the intelligence world, and the law enforcement community.
And what's his background? He's an ex-Navy SEAL, correct?
Correct. So Harvath started out as a SEAL who distinguishes himself while working with the Secret Service on a presidential event. They say, gosh, this guy's great. We ought to bring him to the White House and help bolster our counterterrorism expertise. So Harvath leaves, goes to the Secret Service, and the president says, after working with him a little bit and seeing what he's capable of, says it's ridiculous to have this guy on defense. What we ought to be doing is setting him loose, trusting him to kind of close our eyes and look away and let him go do what needs to be done to go after the bad guys who are not signers of the Geneva and Hague Conventions and are not playing by Marcus of Queensberry rules. So that's kind of the idea. He's got a good moral compass. And if we're going to send somebody and kind of say, okay, go break some eggs to make the omelet, we want to send somebody who's grounded to go do that, who's willing to break the rules, but isn't a sadist, isn't going to do it just for the sake of getting pleasure out of it.
So, I mean, that's what I think Near Dark is really interesting about. Now, but first, before we get in there, was the first Scott Harvath book Lions of Lucerne?
It was.
Yeah. Now that one I read, that one and three others of yours I've read. But I think it was Lions of Lucerne that got me into the character, because as I recall, it was just an amazing kind of political thriller that kind of on the lines of Robert Ludlum. I mean, I think he's kind of seen as the Cold War kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Now, Lions of Lucerne was, what, 2007?
No, Lions of Lucerne came out just a couple of months after 9/11. In fact, we had to stop the presses and put some references into 9/11 of 9/11 into the book, because I had gone through talking about Abu Nidal and some of the big terrorists up to that point, and you couldn't put a book out just, a matter of weeks after 9/11 and not have it be mentioned in there. So we were lucky. We made it. I think we might have been the very first book to come out thriller in this genre with a reference to 9/11.
So I think that's another thing that I love about your book. So not that someone like Ludlum, who died before 9/11 happened. So Ludlum passed away in 2001, as I recall, but before before anything occurred. So his books are kind of rooted in a different type of terrorism, if I can call it that, all right? A different way. I think that you had your first book come out after this really radical event for us. Now, as you've gone forward, you've got some character traits you've mentioned for Scott Harvath. You said he's a good guy, but he's not willing to break some eggs. As you've gone through, have you changed his character? Have you added to his character traits? Because now it's been a long series now, right?
Yeah, he's been in 19 books. I think Harvath hasn't changed, but I have as an author. I think one of the great things about my career, what I do for a living, is I'm deeply rooted in the belief that I can constantly get better. And so maybe it's my Midwestern values, the fact that my dad, who's no longer active Marine, he's now an entrepreneur. My mom was a flight attendant in the 60s for TWA. She also became an entrepreneur. They taught me not to rest on my laurels, not to take anything for granted, to show up every day on the job and treat it as if it was day number one. And I realized very early on that I don't work for the publisher. I work for the readers. Those are the people I need to keep happy. When they go and leave those stars on Goodreads or Amazon, that's my annual performance review. So what I try to do, and I'm serious, I mean, these are my bosses and that's my performance review. So every year I try to raise the bar and get better. So I spend a lot of time still reading books about writing in my off season. And so I don't think Harvath has changed. I think I've changed. I've gotten more comfortable and better at exploring what's going on inside Harvath. So the action and all that kind of cool stuff that I'm known for on the outside, in the outside Harvath's world, is still happening, but I'm taking people into a deeper dive inside. And I really started doing that the last several books, particularly these last two, and the reviewers have noticed. And the compliments that I've gotten from reviewers have really tracked with this, I say like I'm walking the plank or going out on a limb, because I'm uncomfortable revealing these things about him. I don't know if it's not enough. Is it too much?
Oh, no. I think what you've done revealed in Near Dark has been great. I want to talk to you about that, because, you do a lot of counterterrorism and terrorism work, both privately and in your books. Your books deal with these issues, correct? So the question I have too is, when we started before 9/11, and over the course of this time, terrorism tactics in the world have changed. Have you been able to put that into the books? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So for those who are joining us who don't know this, after 9/11, the government, Department of Homeland Security, set up something called the Analytic Red Cell Unit. They knew, even before the 9/11 Commission was convened, that what happened on that day happened because of a failure of imagination on the part of the United States government. And so the government said, we're never going to get caught with our creative pants down again. So they invited a bunch of creative thinkers into DC from outside. So I was one, Michael Bay, the Transformers and Benghazi 13 Hour director, was one. And they had us help them brainstorm where the next attacks might be coming from, what they might look like, where Americans are vulnerable at home and abroad. But I call it the Las Vegas of government programs, because what happens in the red cell must stay in the red cell. I couldn't use that stuff for any of my books.
Okay.
It was cool because, unlike my father, who agreed to pick up a rifle and be a United States Marine, I was being asked to serve my country by using the gray matter between my ears and my creativity. And it was an incredible honor. So they said, listen, we want you to come and do what you do in your books, but do it for us. And so that's how that got going. So what's interesting is the counterterrorism stuff does change. The technology, the weapons, the tactics, all that stuff changes. What's interesting, though, is the espionage stuff doesn't really change that much. In fact, all the old school tradecraft is really the best. The more high tech we get, the better the low tech stuff is in staying off the radar. You don't want to use any electronics, right? So it's funny, you can, as an author, you can learn a lot of this stuff and it becomes a good base. That's a solid base moving forward. I'll mix in some tech stuff here and there to keep it interesting and keep it fresh. But a lot of just the old school, how you build a human network, how you communicate without anybody knowing, is still the best stuff in the world.
Yeah. And, what I find interesting is I was writing a book based in London for the Robert Ludlum books. And, there is a CCTV camera every block.
Everywhere.
So when you're writing a thriller and someone has to go, like you say, kind of go dark, it's now, as an author, it's a little bit harder to do, because we all know that every time you walk down the street, not only do you have the cameras from the government, of course, you have security cameras, but every individual, you see behind me, I'm in a Chicago street, but I have an alley. And everyone has a camera on their garage, right? So no one can break into their garage. So there are cameras that are private cameras, public cameras. When you want Scott Harvath to go dark or something, are you having him put pieces of paper in the brick wall like the way they used to do for espionage, or how are you handling this?
Well, it's funny because the technology goes even beyond the CCTV cameras and facial recognition. There's something called gait recognition. And that was something I learned about several books ago, where your walk is as unique as your fingerprint. And once they've ascertained what your walk is, they can send artificial intelligence through the cameras to find you. The only way you can throw that off is to put like a rock in your shoe, because you can't even fake your own limp consciously, because eventually you fall into your normal gait. So you need to put some sort of an obstruction in your shoe. In fact, the National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, just did an op-ed, not last Sunday, but the Sunday before, talking about the Chinese oppression of the Uyghurs in China and the sanctions that the US are putting on technology companies. And one of the things that the National Security Advisor pointed to was China's use of gait recognition technology to track down dissidents and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, I had that in one of my novels, 4, 5, 6 years ago. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, that is very cool. I always had to look into how you can have people use their phone but not getting in trouble. Wrap it
Right.
in aluminum foil and make sure the RFID doesn't come through, stuff like that. So in Near Dark, you pretty much stripped your character of everything he's loved. He starts out in a very deep, dark place. And can you kind of go in a little bit about this book and what made you decide to take that choice? I mean, this man's lost everything, his love of life, and he's pretty much hitting the bottle pretty hard, huh?
He is, and that was something very new for him because Harvath's always been kind of the ultimate Boy Scout, the way I've portrayed him. But there was also a little bit of a dark side to him where he was always grabbing for the most dangerous assignments, always putting himself at risk. It's interesting because one of the conflicts that I've had in the books that repeat in the books is the fact that he's too valuable to be going into the field. He really should be staying in the United States and developing the next generation of people like him coming up. He should be more management and less labor, but he's convinced that nobody can do it as well as he can. Well, that's the lie he tells himself. The truth is he can't give up the lifestyle. He's addicted to the action. And I know a lot of people who are like this. They don't want to retire. So you get guys that are in their 40s and they're closer to 50 than they are to 45 or closer to 50 than they are to 40. And what ends up happening is there's no rules for them. So they will do steroids. They'll do performance enhancing drugs like an athlete will because their job is very physical and reaction time is really, really important. So I had Harvath cheating and starting to take different substances that if you showed up at if you showed up at a Bears training camp with this stuff in your system, you'd be thrown out. So that is all part of the stuff that I'm trying to convey about Harvath, or I had been until this point where he basically has lost everything. So this book starts with him in a very dark place, not really wanting to go on personally or professionally. What's interesting is if Near Dark was a movie, and I had the movie poster, the log line would be, a $100 million bounty has just been put on the head of America's top spy. And I came up with the idea for the story, Jamie, last year because Barnes & Noble for last summer's book, Backlash, said, Brad, would you give us a bonus chapter so we can have our very own special edition, so we can sell a very special Brad Thor book? And I said yes before I'd even written the manuscript. But I got to the end of last year's book and I went, this doesn't need another chapter. The story's over. And I thought, what am I going to do? My children love the Marvel movies. And we always have to stay in the theater because after the credit crawl, there's one more scene that comes up. Right. And I thought, okay, what kind of a cool thing could I do? So I was working on something and it hit me. I'm going to have some European guy in this interesting city in Vietnam, Haiphong, the third largest city in Vietnam. You're going to be in kind of this crumbling French architecture building. The rain's going to be beaten down and there's going to be $10 million that's being counted out on the table. It's sweaty and there's a storm outside. And essentially this European banker type has come to get a contract taken out on Scott Harvath. And fantastic, that's great. I gave it to my editor. She loved it. Barnes & Noble loved it. Well, guess what? Like those scenes at the end of the Marvel movies, that becomes part of the Marvel universe. I publish this, it becomes part of Scott Harvath's universe. Right. It doesn't matter how many people haven't seen it. It exists now in his universe. And I couldn't pull the old soap opera trope of Harvath waking up at the beginning of this book going, what a bad dream. $100 million bounty. I had to make that the jumping off point for Near Dark. So essentially I took the chapter that I had given Barnes & Noble for the special edition, made that the prologue, and then sat down to write the manuscript for Near Dark. And I couldn't figure out what to do. And so I've got this great network of spies and SEALs and Delta Force operatives. And I reached out to several of them and I said, what would you do if you woke up and figured out that there was a $100 million price tag on your head? And one of them said to me, the only way to kill that contract is to kill the person who put it out on you. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, you think it's a cat and mouse, Brad, where your guy's the mouse and the person with all the money is the cat. He goes, no, you flip that. He becomes the cat and anybody involved in putting a bounty on him, they're the mice. They just don't know it. And you send your guy after him and he kills and puts in the ground every single one of them until all of the participants are dead. That's the only way. You don't negotiate your way out of it. You don't buy your way out of it. You kill those people. That's it. So that was a really cool thing to
Wow.
think of and to jump off with. So we open the book with the contract being purchased
Right,
in Vietnam, then immediately go to Key West, and there's Harvath basically slow motion suicide, drinking himself to death. When two guys walk into the bar he's in, and his spidey sense starts tingling because he's like, wait a second, something's not right here. There are parts of these men and women who go into harm's way that no matter how drunk they are, how down on their luck they may be, and they're not drunks. I'm just saying that you could be partying with friends and you could be, really hitting the tequilas or whatever, but those parts of you do not disappear. Suddenly you're sober. The minute you notice something's out of place, you're switched on and you're ready to go. And that's, as you know, that's chapter 1 of this book. He's like, who are these guys? This is all wrong. These guys, these two right here that you can't see off camera that just walked in. Bad news.
In a lot of thrillers, you get the isolate the hero. So, the hero can't get help in a lot of ways, because if it was you or me or whatever, we'd call the cops, or we'd find somebody to help us, right? And Scott does find someone to help him, obviously, during the course of this book. I'm not going to reveal too much, but he does kind of team up in a way. Now you have, over many of your books, you've had kind of teams. In this one, there is, I will reveal this much, is a woman who he teams up with.
And we can talk about her a little bit. That's fine.
Okay,
totally
so
cool. It doesn't reveal.
How do you write from a woman's perspective now for this kind of character? Because now remember, I'm a martial artist, so I fight. I know all of how to fight, but it's a very different thing from a woman's perspective. So how do you do that? Right.
Okay. So great thing. First of all, I'm so intrigued with your background in Aikido, because I love Aikido, and I studied a little bit in Chicago and then switched over, moving to Nashville, into another samurai art form called Namiru, which is a lot of sword work, but it works empty-handed. So even if you don't have an edged weapon at all, it's just kind of fun stuff.
Yeah.
But so it has always been important for me that the female characters in my novels are not window dressing. I am surrounded by brilliant, talented women, whether it's my wife, my daughter, my agent, my editor, my vice president. These are incredible women. And I want to always be writing characters, particularly my female characters, that are integral to the plot. They're not just along to be arm candy and that kind of a thing. So with this book, I really wanted to create a female character that was on par with my male character. Same kind of background. And so what I did was I chose a Norwegian intelligence operative. And I've been intrigued that Norway has got an all-female special forces team that they admit to. We do all-female things, and some of them are kept quiet. But the Norwegians have something. It was originally called codename Tundra, and then when they publicized it, they called it the Jaeger unit, which is a word for hunter. And so I said to myself, okay, in my book, my character will have come from that unit, and she's going to be pissed, pardon my French, like a lot of the female soldiers are, that they don't get sent on the same operations as the men. They get sent to go talk to the Afghan women because it's such a weird society where men can't ask them questions, particularly foreigners. And she's like, I thought I was going to get to kick in doors and shoot bad guys in the face. And all I'm doing is having tea, trying to pull intel out of these women. This is not what I worked my butt off for to do this. So I'm out. I'm leaving. Forget it. And she gets recruited to come over to the intelligence side of what the Norwegians do. And I thought, okay, that's really cool. But she's also got a lot of personal baggage, a lot of really bad problems in her past. And I thought, okay, this is a perfect person for Harvath. Super smart, a real smart aleck. And she's just as good, if not maybe even better than he is. So what I like about her, and I don't want to give too much away, is that she's smart enough. We know she can lay hands on people and do some damage if she wants to, but her deal is I got guns, I've got tasers. Why why would I get that close to some idiot and let him put his hands on me? And so it becomes a running joke between them, even, where he's like, okay, I'm going to go away and pay for the taxi cab. Don't shoot anybody while I'm gone, sort of a thing. It's like a running joke in the book. So it was fun. And one of the other reasons, Jamie, I did this is because my female readership has been growing in the novels. Yeah. It's really been going up. And so I wanted to top myself with a female character, particularly because I'm getting all this attention from female readers. And so the book came out yesterday, And there are people who have read it already. They're done. They got it. They read it. And I've been hearing from female readers who love it. But what's amazing is the overwhelming amount of men who have said, okay, I'm in love with Sylvie Kolstad. Best character you've ever developed.
Right.
So if you're making it, yeah, you can please some of the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. And yet I'm just getting inundated with fan mail saying, best character you've ever created. So that's
well, if that's kind of the reviews you're getting, that's great, because it is difficult, I think, sometimes to put ourselves in the shoes of another person. I write I have to write male characters, obviously. So I'm no different than what you're going through. I have to find a way to make those characters real to men who want to read about it. So far, it's been great. It's worked. And I'm with you. I think if we continue to grow as authors, it's important to try. I still read other people's works all the time because I'm always getting a tip. I'm always seeing something, I think, that's well done. Or I'll see something, I'll think, that fell flat. So I'm not going to try that. Like, I see why they tried it. And I got to give writers some credit, because some of them try really great stuff. And I think, I don't know if I would have tried that. And if it doesn't work, you'll hear about it from your readers, right? I mean,
I have to tell my publisher all the time. They're like, what do you care? Why are you asking this question? They know why I care, and they care deeply about every facet of this. I'm blessed to be working with the wonderful people I am. But I always say I'm customer service. If there is an issue, I'm going to hear about it on Facebook. They're not going to go to your Facebook page and expect to get somebody to talk to them. But if there's an error in the book, I own that. That's on me. It's not on my publisher, my editor. It's not on any of the lovely people I work with in my kind of human network of experts. If I make a mistake, if there's a spelling error or whatever, and invariably there is, I can have 15 people read it 20 times, over 100,000 words, and you still miss stuff. But, and it's funny too, I'll have people show up and complain about something in a book from 20 years ago, and say, that's wrong. And I'll say, well, that book has been updated multiple times. You're probably reading a first or second edition and blah, 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 blah. But my favorite thing is I've learned a lot about firearms. I mean, I've always loved, we used to shoot. There was we do pheasant shooting. My dad's got a place in Wisconsin, and there's a place right near the Illinois-Wisconsin border. And as a young man, grade schooler, my dad took me out with a .410 and set up empty shotgun shell boxes on sticks in the ground. And I got to shoot at those and then walk with no shotgun as they were pheasant hunting. And that was my introduction. But I didn't know the difference between a clip and a magazine. And I made some mistakes early on. And I heard from people, but really nice people, that said, okay, I was living in Salt Lake City and I got invitations. Hey, I live in Utah. I would love to take you shooting. And I had all these gun enthusiasts that wanted to help me, and they did. And years later, I wrote an article in Shooting Illustrated called Press Don't Squeeze, because you're supposed to press the trigger, not squeeze it. And it was a writer's journey in the world of firearms. And I got to admit to all the mistakes, own every single mistake, every trope that, like the smell of cordite in the air. They don't use cordite anymore. It's like all these things that I got from reading like the Ludlum books, right? And reading Freddie Forsyth and John le Carré, the stuff that my parents read, when they weren't looking and they were done, I would grab their books and read. So that's what I thought those things were. So I was probably perpetuating some mistakes that were made until I finally got educated. So it's
the same. I had, I used to do food, drug, and medical device law. So I defended large pharmaceutical companies. We also did FDA petitions, to get something approved at FDA. And I did litigation, a lot of litigation, international. And so my character has a lot of biological things that she comes across. So the last one was the smallpox. And it was kind of interesting to me because it was called Blood Run. So in that one, I had been reading a newspaper that the national NIH, they had closed off their offices back 30 years ago, left everything there. The place was dusty, whatever, and they moved to a new building. In 2012, I think, somebody finally got around to emptying out the closets, and they found vials of smallpox in an old closet, just in a box, just put it in a box, right? Little vials. So
that's terrible.
It's terrible. So they ship it off to CDC, and CDC calls them up and says, these are viable smallpox. Now, this smallpox sat in that closet without air conditioning, without any type of climate control, and it survived 50 years. They think some of it was from the 1950s, and they found it in 2012. So it's always interesting. So whenever there is something like that, now I do talk to the experts, people I used to know from Baxter or Pfizer or whatever, because I get a hold of the scientists and I say, could this happen? And I did make one mistake in one book, and we did change it right before it went to publication, thank God. But where a scientist said, no, that's not a bacteria, that's not going to act that way. It's a bacteria, but it acts differently, and you've got it acting the wrong way. And I said, no one's going to ever know the difference, because this guy's, you know, it was a woman actually, she was super bright. And I said, no one's going to know. And she's like, could you please just change it? I said, sure. So we did. Boy, a lot of people know about this stuff. So you get the emails later like, I can't believe you knew that. And I'm thinking, I didn't. It was the expert. So it's kind of interesting to hear you say that. And but back to the character, back to Scott Harvath. So how are you handling aging? 20 years. He's kind of aged, right?
So I used to kind of have him age a year a book, and I would track election cycles. So there'd either be whatever existing president was in the last 4 books, they could get reelected or not, you know.
Oh,
so
okay.
I was even, it's just that the pace seemed to work, right. And I could line that up, and it was fun to put in, you know, from him going from being the president's secret weapon to a new president coming in going, no, we're not going to do that. We're shutting down your program. You're out. You know, so I like doing some of the intrigue in Washington, the intrigue at the CIA. What's it like? I mean, as the CIA grows, there's more rules, there's more regulation, there's a little more red tape. There are some folks that want to take great risks, some folks that want to mitigate the risk as much as possible. So there's some interesting internal dynamics that go on that I think a lot of us can relate to just from our own workplaces. There's always personalities, people we get along with, don't get along with, stuff that's like, oh, if the company would just do this, we'd go like that, and they don't see it that way. And so I do try to, I did for a while age Harvath a year at a time, but not anymore. Now I just, I've slowed it down. You always have to keep in mind the timeline, where things happen. It can't be like this happened and then he woke up Saturday morning and that happened. So but this idea of I'm going to age him a year with every book, I'm not doing it anymore. It's just, he's too much fun. The readers love him too much. And it's not like they sit around going, wait, he didn't celebrate a birthday in this book. You know, they don't mind. So when you write,
for anyone who's writing a book, yay, if you're writing a manuscript, congratulations. It's so much fun. You're going to, if you've been published, great, you know all about it. But if you haven't, just hang in there. It's just fun. But how do you do it? Are you an outliner or do you seat of your pants?
No, I am seat of pants. I forget who said this. It's seat of pants, seat of chair. I'm not an outliner. And Robert Frost once said, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. No joy in the writer, no joy in the reader. No surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. So I want my palms to sweat. I want my heart to pound. I want to have the same experience you do reading it while I'm writing it. And it's funny, I joke that there's nights I go home and my wife can tell by my face if it's a red wine night or a bourbon night, because I've backed myself into a terrible corner and I don't know how I'm going to get out of it because I don't have an outline. And she always says, don't worry, it'll work out, you'll fix it. I outlined one novel once. Dan Brown, the author of The Da Vinci Code, is a friend of mine, and Dan shared with me the outline for Da Vinci because we have the same agent. And she said, oh, Brad, you might like outlining. Dan really enjoys it. And I got to see everything that didn't make it into Da Vinci Code. So that's kind of neat. I've got a behind the scenes look at that novel that nobody else has seen. And I tried to outline a book, and it absolutely took all of the passion and all of the energy out of me. There were no surprises. It wasn't fun anymore. I liked knowing my guy or this character has a bullet in him. The blood's pouring out. He's got a briefcase full of bearer bonds. It needs to be on the other side of Zurich in 20 minutes to catch the train. And there's 6 people chasing him. How is he going to get there? I want to have, it's like doing Sudoku or crossword puzzles every day. And it's tough, but because it's tough, it's rewarding. If it was boring, I just couldn't do this job. And so you'd think 20 novels. You've written 7. You would think it gets easier. It doesn't. I find it actually gets harder because, again, I keep raising that bar. So every year it's tougher for me. I'm pulling teeth and
Yeah, I mean, as the bar goes up, you're right. It gets more difficult. Now, obviously, I've got a ways to go to get to 20, but I still think it's hard every time, and but very fulfilling. And I don't outline. In fact, the Ludlam estate wanted an outline, and I was petrified because I can't do it either. If I'm not excited, I'm afraid that the reader won't be. So
Hmm.
I sat down and over the course of, I don't know, 3 days, wrote the first 25 to 50 pages of the novel that I was going to give them. And I thought, well, I'll just give them pages because I'm afraid to outline. And they loved it. And I got away from the outline. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, although I have friends, I think Jeff Deaver moved over from seat of the pants to outlining and he loves it. So, I mean, there's people on both sides of that debate. But you mentioned you come home. Do you write in a cafe? Do you write at home? Do you have a home
No,
office?
no, no, no. I've got a little setup in the garage. So when I come home, it's like, you walk through that door and you're inside, sort of a thing. So
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So
That's what
is
I
it
mean.
above your
Out of my
garage?
workspace. It's
It's like
off to
what?
the side. It's off to the side. We could have had another bay for another car, and it just made sense to convert it to a writing space.
Can
So
I tell you how much I love the fact that you write in a garage?
yeah, Stephen King wrote in his laundry room.
I know.
You
I know.
know. So
I
there you
hate to
go.
say it. I write in the corner of the room upstairs that overlooks a lovely alley. So, I would love to have a better view, but I watched, people, the rats sometimes come at night. I watch all that stuff and I think, oh God, but it's where I'm comfortable now.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend, another author, just made out this beautiful home office. And I have one too that I don't use. And she said she can't write there anymore. She's still back on her kitchen table with her laptop. So I guess
Yeah, if you had a great view, it could take away from it. I mean, that's really
yeah.
writers are the ultimate procrastinators. When it's time to write something, you've got the cleanest desk, cleanest closets, cleanest cars. It's crazy.
Yeah. Marie Kondo your house every other week.
Uh-huh.
So another question for you. If you didn't write thrillers, what would you write? Got to be fiction. Can't be nonfiction.
Wow. You know what? That's an interesting question because Stephen King said you should write what you love to read because that's where your passion is. I
Right.
don't know what I would be writing, maybe young adult stuff,
Okay.
because I fell in love with reading the Black Stallion books and the
Hmm.
Hardy Boys. And then, like I said, I started grabbing my parents' novels. So I've always been a thriller reader. And if I go to the bookstore and I get a choice of what I'm going to read, I always go to the thrillers first. I love Eric Larson as far as nonfiction, who did
Yeah.
Devil in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
White City. I'm reading The Splendid and the Vile right now about the Blitz in London, which is incredible. All the Light We Cannot See was a fantastic book. It was not necessarily a thriller.
Right.
I've been on this very big, for the last couple of years, World War II book, Churchill and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I cannot get enough of it. It's been my guilty pleasure, along with my other guilty pleasure, which is to read fiction, read my thrillers.
Right. So it would stay really more with mysteries and
Yeah,
things
and
like that. A little
fiction.
bit of history thrown in. Would you write a history novel? Have you thought
I
about it?
don't think so. I don't think so because yeah, I think I would be worried that I'm missing a detail. I would not be able to stop the research phase because I would convince myself there was still one more letter out there I didn't get. That's such detective work to do the nonfiction stuff. And I don't know
Yeah.
that I'm wired. I can get the details right for a thriller as far as tactics or weapons or things like this. But you're really like Indiana Jones when you write nonfiction, when you write history, you really have to go to all four corners of the earth to hunt down info. So I don't think I love reading it, but easy reading, as they say, is damn hard writing. And
Yeah.
I don't know how Larson does it. I love him. He's in The
Have you
Garden of
written any?
Beasts. It's one of my
Oh, and
favorites.
The Garden of the Beast was great. Have you written any screenplays?
I've dabbled a little bit, and before I was an author, I had my own show on public television nationwide. I had a travel show where I was the producer, writer, and host. So yeah, so I've
Where's the coolest
written.
place you went?
Oh, they're all awesome. I mean, I love Switzerland and Greece are two of my favorite places.
Okay.
Uh, Yeah, so I got to, and it was in Lucerne doing my television show where I saw the Lion of Lucerne for the first time, and I loved the alliteration. I liked the Lion of Lucerne, and I said, if I ever write a novel, because it had been a dream of mine since I was a little boy, I'm going to call
Right.
it The Lions of Lucerne. I don't know how Switzerland's going to work its way into the novel, but that's going to be the name. And then on my honeymoon, my wife asked me, what would you regret on your deathbed never having done? And I told her writing a novel and getting it published. And she said, well, when we get home, you're going to start spending 2 hours a day making that dream come true. And then we were sitting in a cafe in Amsterdam, and I was reading an English newspaper, and there was a little intelligence article about a Swiss intel officer who embezzled all this money from the Swiss army to train his own shadow militia high in the Alps with high-tech weapons from his own private arsenal. And I said, those are the lines of Lucerne. That's the jumping off point for my very first novel. That's where I got the idea.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Have you,
pretty cool.
what have you researched that surprised you? I have, well, a book, what you researched for one of the books that surprised you, that seemed counterintuitive, but is true.
Well, so
Tough
my
question,
thriller,
I realize.
No. My thriller Blacklist had to do with the concept of total surveillance. So I studied how governments surveil people. So the Brookings Institute had a white paper that was chilling. They studied regimes around the world and found that as the cost of data storage plummets, the more surveillance governments do on their own people. That was fascinating. And then I also learned that the precursor to IBM was incredibly involved with the Nazis. And if it wasn't for their counting machines, the Nazis would have ended up killing less people. That the precursor, IBM's precursor company, gave these counting machines or sold them to the Nazis, licensed them to the Nazis, and it made the Nazis much more efficient at interning and killing the people in concentration camps. That was stunning for me.
Wow. Yeah, for me, what's stunning is when I read about all the mishaps that go on. You know, we think all the smallpox is locked in supposed to be only in Russia and America, and it's supposed to be locked away, and then a mishap happens. And I think, wow, you know, there's something about being in the world where nothing's really quite, you can never predict what's going to happen, right? And it's kind of fun. Yep. And I think that's why thriller novels, at least I think, it's a kind of a safe way for all of us to kind of get some of these emotions out, where they talk about fairy tales for kids. I think thriller novels do that for us too. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. There's a catharsis that happens. And at least in my portion of the thriller genre, we want to believe that there are people out there willing to bend and break the rules to keep us safe. That if the bad guys are not going to have a playbook, then we ought to have a couple of people of our own that are willing to go out and take the field and give it right back to them if it means saving American lives. Now, I present that in the novels. I don't take a position on that. I let the reader decide, you know, is that right? What does it mean to be the United States? Are we going to lower ourselves to the level of our enemies? And what does it mean if we're willing to let one or two people go? So it's a great moral dilemma. It's a great question to have. So I like to pepper the books. Again, I'm in the escape business. I want people to read one of my thrillers and forget about everything while they're reading. You know, they're short, crisp, cinematic chapters that you can easily breeze through. And, you know, one of the questions I've gotten on tour this year, Jamie, is, well, you're going to write about COVID-19 in the next one? And I said, absolutely not. I'm selling escape from COVID-19. Not going to include it. I don't think you could have two spies socially distanced and try to trade information behind masks. And it could burn itself out, God willing. We get a vaccine, God willing. It's the same reason I never talked about Osama bin Laden in any of my books, because I knew eventually he'd be killed or captured. And then your book's worthless if you have him involved in it. So I never touched him.
Yeah, you know, I do a lot of the bio stuff, and the thing about COVID is if it's not this one, it'll be another. I think nature has a way of finding a way. Nature has a way of teaching us things. You know, my family used to be in Miami, Miami Beach. And when those hurricanes hit, you know, nature doesn't play. Nature basically says, I'm here, you're not, you know, I own you. So
well, not to scare people. That's the big fear right now, is what they're calling a corona cane. If we get a hurricane hitting some of these southern states where coronavirus is going wild, because once you exhaust the National Guard, we count on the Red Cross to come in, and the majority of Red Cross volunteers are 64 or older, the biggest portion of them, and they are most susceptible to the virus. So it's something that's been war gamed and is currently being war gamed. What do we do? Heaven forbid we get hit with a hurricane in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. So that's something that's being war gamed in the halls of power right now.
Yeah, well, my family was there during Hurricane Andrew. And, you know, my mother always told me, she said, you know, we've learned how to have electricity. We live in air-conditioned houses. She said, we've controlled so much about nature. And she said, you know, that taught me, it still doesn't play. nature's going to win. And I thought that was, I thought that was interesting. A lot of the experts I deal with the bio stuff tell me if it's not this one, it'll be another, because nature's always changing. Nature's always adapting. Nature, that's what nature does. And you just have to get used to it, and you have to get comfortable with it and try not to get too afraid when it hits you. So there you go.
The one thing I'm looking forward to is if we look back at the Spanish flu, the pandemic,
it went away.
1919, it did go away. And wow, I'm convinced now, having lived in lockdown and everything and worried about keeping my family and my friends healthy, I now know why the Roaring 20s were so roaring. I can't wait for this thing to go away so that we can completely party. I cannot wait. Cannot wait.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're kind of at a point where we should start asking some questions.
Sure.
And if anyone has any answering questions, I don't know how to do this. There's a Q&A here.
Well, I do. There is one on there. It is from Jerry, and I don't know why he muted me. And Jerry has asked, do you have any TV or movie plans?
So that's a great question. So thank you, Jerry, for that question. I joke with people. I've been at this since my first novel came out right after 9/11, so almost 20 years. And in a town like Los Angeles that's so full of beautiful people, I have kissed every frog in Hollywood. I have been left at the altar more times than you can imagine. I joke that Hollywood studio executives are like lions. And when a new one comes into the pride and slaughters all the cubs, they do the same thing with movie deals. They're like, nope, had nothing to do with setting this one up here. We're going to let that expire. What is cool, though, and I can't go into too many details, is right before we went into lockdown, we had been approached by an amazing, very successful Hollywood producer who said, love your books, would just think you've got this whole universe that's like Marvel. You've got 20 books. We think this is huge. We could do a ton with this. And I said, okay, well, you're huge. I love your movies. Who do you think the director would be? And he said, well, I've got 3 people in mind. Who do you want, Brad? I said, no, tell me your 3. And right at the top of his list was my favorite director. And I said, you can get him. And he said, how about tomorrow at 3:00? We'll do a conference call. And he got the person on the phone, and the person, turns out, is a fan of my books as well. And it was just this big love fest. So now we're slowly putting the deal together in Hollywood because they're still making deals even during the time of COVID, so that once everything gets lifted and people can go back to work, all of these deals are set up, and it's going to be a race for production. You know, crews are going to be so happy because they're going to be in such great demand. So yeah, we have something exciting going. I can't say the names yet because they want to make the announcement once they have all the financing and the studio stuff set up. But we've got something huge, and it's worth every single deal I had that did not go all the way through. It's worth it. All that disappointment and heartache is worth it to get me to this team because they're amazing. They're so successful. The amount of money they made at the box office, they're not B-list. These are A+ listers. They're fabulous.
Great. Any other questions, Kathy? Your microphone's muted. Kathy, your microphone's muted.
How do you access the DARPA level of technologies?
Okay, so I actually met somebody from DARPA when I was at a political event. Super nice guy. And so nobody tells me anything I'm not supposed to put out there. I have had people say, wait a second, we told you A, and we talked about C, and you figured out B. We didn't tell you B, but you figured it out, and B can't be in the book. I'm like, oh, so point B is true. They're like, we're not saying that. We're just saying it's got to come out of the book. Because I always go back and share the stuff people have helped me with to make sure. I had one person once say, you need to change the name of that in the description. I'm like, well, I can pull it out. They're like, no, just change it. And I went through 6 revisions before they said, okay. I said, all right, so now I'm not revealing anything. And the person said, no, at this point, it just can't be traced back to me. Nobody's going to know I talked to you about this. So I don't want to do any harm, number one. I don't want to put any of our servicemen or women or any of the intel community people in harm's way. And so I'm very, very careful. If one of my people in my network, one of these wonderful experts says, take that out, we don't want that out there, I take it out. Even if it's something they didn't tell me and I invented and they're like, nah, too close to the truth, pull it. I do, and I find another way to do it. So it's a great question.
I don't see any more unless somebody else has one percolating.
I have one.
Oh, Jamie's got one. All right.
So if you pull it out, do you just fashion it back into something that's a little bit safer? Do you have to resubmit it to that person?
Yeah, yes, always. If somebody says, hey, we'd like to have that out, I will take it out, and then I'll go back and say, prove, look, I took it out, just so you know, I respect you and I took it out. I put this in. Are you comfortable with this being in there? And that's what I do. I don't want to poison the well with these people that trust me. And I mean, it's decades I've been building these relationships. Some of them are newer. So, but yeah, it's important to me that I respect them, because the books in a sense are an homage to so many of these men and women who are the quiet professionals. They can't come out and beat their chests and say, look what I did. Look at the guy, look at this operation I ran. They technically don't exist. And so I want to take readers right up to the edge and have them peer over into these worlds. That's part of my job of being a thriller writer. I call what I do faction, where you don't know where the facts end and the fiction begins.
Right.
But I couldn't do it without the help of the people who have been there, done that, and have the scars to prove it.
Kathy, any more?
Not a single smart alecky Cubs or White Sox thing. Not one of those. Yeah.
Are you a White Sox fan? That would be the next question.
So here's the deal. I am a Cubs and a White Sox fan, and that's not splitting the baby. Let me tell you why. So my dad's South Side, grew up on the South Side, Roseland. I grew up on the North Side, and so I grew up kind of as a Cubs fan, but my wife worked for Midwest Orthopedics at Rush, and they took care of the White Sox. And so whenever she had to be on duty, I got to go to White Sox games, and she started introducing me in the locker room. And we found that several of the players were fans, that they'd sit in the dugout reading my books sometimes. So I had all these fans at the White Sox, and they're putting food on the table because my wife is a doc for them. How could I not fall in love with the White Sox? So I became a fan of both. In fact, we got to be part of that whole thing when they went to the World Series. So it was perfect timing. And I think they're all lovely people in that organization. And I got to know the White Sox better than I ever got to know anybody with the Cubs. So there you go.
We had Bill Melton here. Do you remember Bill Melton?
I don't.
The White Sox? Yeah, he played, I believe it was third base. But he came here and he told us a little bit about what the White Sox used to be like back in the 60s and 70s. It was quite interesting. You two have been fabulous. I'm not kidding you. Out of all the authors groups that I do, I was just fascinated. Jamie, you asked such unbelievable great questions. And Brad, you were just enthusiastic about your book, and you could tell that. When you write it, you're in it. And I think that shows in your book and the popularity of your books. Don't you? I really appreciate your time and effort. Like I said, I don't think we have any more questions. Jerry writes, did you know Vince Flynn? Oh, yeah.
So great question. Yes, Jerry, I did know Vince. In fact, Vince and I had the same editor. And Vince gave me one of my very first blurbs for my first novel. And the gentleman now, Kyle Mills, who's writing Vince Flynn's Mitch Rapp series, is a friend of mine. And I knew Kyle before I was ever an author. So
oh my God, say hi to Kyle. Kyle and I co-authored on Covert One. He wrote one and then I wrote one. And
oh, isn't that cool? Yeah.
So say hi to him.
I just did something for Thriller Fest with Kyle. So Kyle's a good friend. Kyle and Kim have been friends for years before I was ever an author.
He's in Wyoming, right?
Yep. So small world. Small world. So,
and let's talk about books a little bit for our audience that is still sitting there. Chip writes, can we invite Brad to the club and do an in-person version?
When COVID's over?
Chip, it would be my pleasure. I have done in person at the club before, a really cool lunch thing. So I would love to come back. I love the club. It would be my absolute honor. I've been to, in fact, I met Marcus Luttrell the author of Lone Survivor, and he's the SEAL of the 4-man team that survived. They made a movie of it with Mark Wahlberg.
Sure.
I actually, well, that's where I met him, was at the club, and he's one of my dearest friends now. So I was there for a luncheon. Yeah. And now Marcus, I just did a FaceTime with his twin brother and former governor of Texas, Rick Perry, today, shortly before this event. I was on FaceTime with the two of them, just catching up.
I always love telling the story about when Marcus Luttrell came here. All of the board members were in the lobby, and he walked in with a pair of jeans on, flip-flops, and his dog. And the general manager was standing there going, okay, I'm not going to tell him he can't have jeans on. I'm certainly not going to tell him he can't have flip-flops.
Not Marcus, not after he's been through, with his service animal.
And it was awesome. He let the dog walk all around the dining room. It was just a blast. It was a great time. Please tell him we love him at the Union League Club and love to have him back.
I will definitely tell him. I definitely will.
Ken User wrote, I listen to the audiobooks, don't read them. And what do you think about audio?
I love audio. Audio right now is the fastest growing sector of the publishing business. People have realized I can do my gardening, or I can go on my bike ride or my run, whatever, and still be taking in a book. So coronavirus has actually been really good for publishing. We've got a lot of people kind of sick of watching TV. They've watched everything on Netflix. They don't want to see any more news about COVID-19. And a lot of people are going back to reading, which is fabulous. And the audio books have been just skyrocketing. So I love audio, and the gentleman who narrates my books, Armin Schultz, is fantastic. He's so darn good. People say, why don't you read them? Because I'm not a Broadway trained actor. I can't keep track of 15 voices in it, and he can, and he's terrific. I love him. And that's why on my website, and anybody wants to go to the website, it's bradthor.com. For each book, I have an audio sample there, because I want people to hear the quality of the narration in case somebody wants to do a book in audio format. You get a little teaser there. So
Chip did add on, and I missed reading it. He said, he said when COVID blows over, he'd love to have you back here at the club, but he missed it, and he would love to catch up over a bourbon or two. And we could catch up at a Cubs game. He said you would love his seats. So
fantastic. Well, thank you.
Josh just added your address. And also I wanted to plug the book stall. So if any of our listeners would like to purchase a book, we have signed autograph plates from Brad Thor that we will also include in the book. The book stall number is 847-446-8979, or you could just email me at khurley, HURLEY, @ulcc.org.
And also included with each book, if I can add, Kathy, we designed 4 special, they're almost like postcards, each with a relevant kind of factoid from the book. So with each book, we slipped in one of 4. So you don't know which one you're going to get. It's a little added thank you for supporting the book stall. They're wonderful people. I've done book signings there, and we wanted to provide a little value add for all of you lovely folks that are supporting them. So please consider buying a book from them. Doesn't even have to be my book. I just want to support our lovely independent bookstores. It's been really tough on them to not have the foot traffic. So books make great gifts. You look like the most wonderful person in the world when you give a book. So please consider supporting the book stall. They're great people.
And no Amazon. The independent book.
Amazon's okay too. 80% of my business happens there. I never slam Amazon, but when I get a chance to support a local bookstore like the book stall.
They got enough money off of a lot. Thank you so much, you guys, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Jamie, I can't thank you enough, and Brad, you definitely have to come back to the Union League Club after COVID. We'd love to put you up in a real nice suite here. Bring your wife. You can visit some of family, friends. We'd love to have you back.
I have a beautiful picture on my phone. The last time I was there was for a wedding a couple years ago. So I've got this beautiful picture from inside. So thank you for having me, Kathy. Jamie, thank you for hosting.
Thank you.
I hope you and I can
It's great meeting
keep
you,
in touch.
Brad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good night, everyone.
All right. Take
Bye, everybody.
care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.